at the point where I need to start the electronics. And so now we have to develop a way to house the electronics without making cavities and ensure all the wiring comes together properly. So following the strategy of using sort of found objects, I found this old Telecaster control plate that's made out of wood. I don't know what kind of wood it is, but very rigid wood. And this is the wiring configuration we're going to use. So there's 3 humbucker pickups, and I have 3 500K mini pots. So this is an independent wiring strategy, and that just means that lugs 2 and 3, which is the middle lug and the third lug, are reversed. And that means I have independent control over each volume. And because they all go to a bus, if I shut one down, the other 2 still output, right? I've chosen to use a bus system. These are just simply like terminal strips, and they have 3 terminals each, which allows me to add the 3 grounds for the bridges on this one. And then on the middle one, I can add the 3 grounds from the pickups. And then the top one is a bus for the hot tips that are coming from the volume to the bus, going into the hot of the output jack here. All right, this is working out so well. This system of having these 3 independent volume knobs is just working out perfectly because I can blend the sound of each neck with just these 3 knobs. I'm quite surprised how quiet it is, so there's no hiss and there's no static. There's no 60 cycle hum, and that's surprising because all the wiring is external. There's no cavities, no internal cavities. All the wiring from the pickups and the bridge grounds, these are the 3 bridge grounds, are all external. Now clearly the wires are shielded with just the normal insulation, and you'll notice the jack is also external. And this is just a simple PCB type mounted plastic jack with sort of the exposed terminals here. So if I touch them, I'd probably get some kind of static. Yeah, there you go, see that? So it's all external, but there's no hum outside of that. So just to, again, it's pretty whisper quiet, which is very, very surprising. My Harp guitar is 100% complete. Everything is finished. All the electronics have been installed. The wiring is now complete too. I'm very happy with this. The only thing I have left to do is come up with a tuning that's going to allow me to make some music. Now, I'm sort of at the mercy of the string gauges and the scale length. So even though I would like to represent every note available, I don't think that's going to be possible. But I can choose a handful of notes in a scale, and then within that scale, I'll be able to write some compositions. So for the bass section of the harp, these are 6 bass strings. So this came from a 6-string bass set. These are just traditional gauges for a 6-string bass. I don't remember them, but obviously that thick fat one is hovering somewhere around 72, 75, 76, I don't remember. And I'm using these headless single saddle tuners at the top. So one of the things I had to do was add this really long string tree. This is typically what you'd find on like a Floyd Rose equipped guitar. And I needed to do that to ground all the strings. So this ensures I know all the strings are touching. This is gold plated, so I did file and sand off the bottom of it so it's exposed metal. So I have exposed metal touching every string, and that means I can ground it at the bridge. This neck also has the long string tree, not for grounding purposes, just to get the right tension on the nut. And these nuts, both of them on both necks, are extra high, and the idea is you want them to be off the fretboard as much as possible so that the actual strings can ring true and they're not touching the fretboard in any manner. On the last tuner here, the actual tuning button wouldn't fit, right? It's gonna be blocked by this piece. So what I did was I used banjo tuners. This was like the coolest thing ever because the banjo tuner is geared and it basically goes straight out the back. So the button is on the back. So this basically maintains the look of all the tuners, but the actual button for this one, this here, is on the back. Same thing for the middle neck, only this time it's the last two tuners. These are banjo tuners. So with one set of banjo tuners, I was able to kind of like take care of everything. So for these two, the buttons are straight back, just the way a banjo works. But I did continue to use this idea of, instead of having wires on the front face of the guitar being exposed, I just kind of cover them in brass tubes. And they kind of terminate here, and then they go off to the side of the back. This pickup is slanted because the actual strings are slanted. So this is at an angle like this. And so I needed to design some little stilts so that I could still maintain the actual string being as close to the pole as possible, but at an angle. I used the brass tubes again. So we have one brass tube here that is for the middle pickup, and then this brass tube here is for this one here. So this is a 7-string pickup, much like the one I just showed you. And I needed to use 7-string because the width of the string from the center of this last one to the center of the first one is much wider than a normal 6-string. And it's also at an angle because the tailpiece is at an angle. The tailpiece is grounded at the very bottom, so you don't see the ground point. I did have to use a piece of wood here to distribute the weight of the tension that the tailpiece is adding to this hollow top. So it's got just a piece of maple, that's maple, rough cut, to kind of continue with the look. There's a 3D printed stilt here that's giving me that angle that I want. And then there's also a 3D printed stilt here for the pickup to give me the angle. I know this is really busy, and I had intended on designing my own pickups to keep things minimal, keep the look very minimal, but it was way too ambitious of a project, so I just used off-the-shelf pickups. So this is a big, hot mess. This brass tube here is essentially the ground for the bridge, and the bridge is grounded here at the bottom, just some solder joints. This is the ground for the first neck, and I needed to put one solder joint here because it's all grounded to the string tree at the top. And I also use these like DIY shop-made brackets. These are found objects also. These are feeler gauges. And I just cut the feeler gauges in half, drilled some holes, and then they're easily bent around. And this is nice and secure. It's not going anywhere. These are copper conduit clamps. I don't know what they are. I got them at Home Depot. But they're essentially just like a way for you to, like, I don't know, clamp down a wire or something. But I'm just using them for the tube to hold down and secure the tube. That's also not going anywhere. Here's another one of these conduit clamp things. They actually look a lot like headless string clamps, and I thought about using them for that, but the screw doesn't actually go down enough to clamp down a string, but it does work really well for these brass tubes. And again, that's not going anywhere. You know, these are nice and secure. I just love how Frankenstein this looks. It really is cool. Again, I wanted to have external wiring, no cavities. I used these like DIY feeler gauges as clamps. I found some real clamps, scrap aluminum as a clamp, more clamps on the side. And all the wiring is nice and exposed, really easy to troubleshoot. These are knobs I made on an old video. I actually used a 4th axis on a laser, and I was able to engrave them and make these knobs. So again, found objects I had laying around. So the tally plate is on 3D printed stilts. So it's raised above. That means the pots have plenty of space. And I just think it looks cool. And it's not in the way. Obviously, this is a harp. You're not playing it like a guitar, so it's never going to touch you. It's never in the way. Just some of the design choices I made. I wanted the wires to kind of wrap around. I wanted them to kind of look like veins. And again, this is going to live outside. This is an outdoor art piece. This is going to get wet. Everything's going to be destroyed. That's the point. That's what nature does. This is all about entropy. This is going to be sort of a natural way that this instrument disintegrates and dissolves into nature itself, back into nature. I mean, that's what a guitar is, right? A guitar starts off as nature. And now what we're doing is we're putting it back in nature to go back into it. It's just there's something poetic and romantic about it, but you get the idea. The neck's holding up pretty good. So if you recall, this is the one that's been outside for close to 3-4 years. It was terribly warped. It still is. The string tension is actually pulling against that warping, that bowing, and it's still doing fine. I don't think it'll ever straighten out. I think that bow was perfect for this particular build. I did fill up the truss rod channel with epoxy and some carbon graphite reinforcement rods, so that's pretty strong. Same thing with this neck over here. All right, so my next steps are to come up with some kind of tuning that basically accommodates the tension and scale length of each string, and then compose a little song for you. Then we can go on to the next phase of determining where we're going to put this guitar. Where is it going to live outside? Where is it going to inspire and become a part of nature again?